Hey there, I'm Tracy Rigdon, and this is the Contrast Project Lounge podcast. Often random, but always relevant, always real, and practically nothing is off limits. This podcast is for you. Are you ready for this? Let's do it. Welcome back to the program, guys. I want to thank you each and every one for being here today. Remember, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, Threads, and YouTube. Don't forget to like, share, and comment, and smash all of those subscribe buttons. Joining me today is nationally known instructor, educator, leader, Dr. Don Emerick. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I can't complain. I rarely can. I like I was telling you earlier, I was in the studio early this morning doing some edits, and I took a break from that and had to go out in the garden because I can't stand to go without my garden for one day.
That's good.
That's my thing.
Not many people can have that release, so that's good.
That is my thing. Well, listen, we wanted to talk about the program, the framework, the work that you do, which is so important, by the way. You work with business leaders and educators, and you do talks with people, and your program is based around trauma-informed leadership. Can you explain to us what that is?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this and to be on your show, Tracy. I really do appreciate it. Mm-hmm. So the concept of trauma-informed principles, I mean, that's been around probably a good 20, 25 years now. It actually, the whole concept of that came from out of a study between Kaiser Permanente and the CDC. And what they were finding was that there was a correlation between adverse childhood experiences, domestic violence, alcoholism, an episodic traumatic event like hurricanes or wildfires.
Sure.
Those types of traumatic events that a child would experience, what that study showed was that there was a long-term impact on adult mental health and adult physical health. And so it really launched this idea of trauma really having a long-term effect on life expectancy outcomes or just regular health outcomes. Mm-hmm. And so that's just been around. And so it's been studied over and over again. A lot of communities, a lot of healthcare systems really put trauma-informed principles into their practice to make sure that they're engaging families who want to access their services and make sure that they're not re-traumatizing them, right? Like not creating any secondary harm to families who are coming and accessing services. What I kind of started doing, I've been a CEO for several organizations, nonprofit and in the government sector, both city and county. And what I started doing several years ago was taking those concepts, taking those trauma-informed principles, and kind of starting to incorporate them into the workplace. And the idea that if this is good enough for your clinical settings, sure. And working with families, then why can't we do that in our own workplaces and interact with our staff, interact with our peers, and interact, sure, quite frankly, with our supervisors using the same approaches. So that is what I kind of came up with in this trauma-informed leadership is how we as leaders, how we show up in the workplace, maybe because of our own childhood, adverse childhood experiences that we haven't really recognized. Sometimes when we don't recognize how that childhood experiences has sort of influenced who we are as adults, we sort of bring those characteristics into the workplace. And so
Sure.
how we show up as leaders in the workplace really does set the tone, not only in your relationships with your staff, but it also sets the culture of your organization. And 2020 probably was the come to Jesus for everybody.
Yeah.
2020 was a horrific asterisk next to everything that happened in 2020.
Yeah.
And what you saw there, Tracy, was so many people really struggling. And what I saw, even with myself, I struggled. What I really saw is that the workplace was not prepared for people
No.
bringing in mental health challenges and some of the traumatic experiences that they had in 2020. So I'll take a breath and see if that made any sense to you.
It did, and absolutely, like you said, with the pandemic and everything, it with our studio was affected. The studio was shut
Mm-hmm.
down. Was shut down because people did not want to come into the studio anymore, with masks and all that kind of thing. And studio
Mm-hmm.
environment is so small, so you're shoulder to shoulder with people, and usually several people in the studio at the same time. So
Yeah.
that effectively shut down that operation. So we went pretty much totally mobile. Everything's remote. So which has been
Yeah.
fine for me. However, I no longer have a producer. I no longer have these other people to do all the work. So and I can relate to a lot of the people, and you read about this too. We've read about this where you know two income families. Either lost one or both of those incomes during the pandemic, whether they got the relief checks or not, they still lost those jobs. And then some of those places didn't open back up. And then you started seeing some real stress stress at the home
Absolutely.
front. People were
You
at
bet.
each other's throat. So
Sure. Well, what you also had is that you had um, this realization that people were so stressed in the workplace that all of a sudden, what might have been tolerable behavior from their leadership was not tolerable anymore. So there
yeah,
was just this reckoning of toxic work cultures and bully bosses and just really bad situations. And here's what I would say, Tracy. When we think of, so we spend 81,000 hours in our lifetime. We spend 81,000 hours working, and that's just behind the amount of time that we spend sleeping. Um,
right.
so that, just think of it, just sit with that a little bit, right? So what you're doing
Yeah,
right now and what I do, right? Like I work and everybody, we spend 81,000 hours working. And so for someone to say that your mental health or your physical health is only the responsibility of your community or your household is just BS. And I
yeah,
think that there is what I've just been really trying to create a movement, this movement of a million trauma informed leaders in 10 years, this movement of no, 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 no. Okay, look, workplaces, organizations, HR departments, you do have a responsibility for wellness with your employees. If we spend most of our time in the workplace, you absolutely do have a responsibility for creating a wellness environment, a
sure.
non-toxic environment for your employees. And I think that what you saw in 2020 is people were like, you know what? This is crap. I'm not doing this anymore. And they were literally leaving,
Hmm.
walking away from jobs, not with a safety
Right.
net, not with another job in place, saying, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm either going to go and find a job where I can work from home, or I'm going to find another job that really values belonging and compassion. And so I believe that that was really the catalyst of the Great Resignation. So you had a lot of people that were
Hmm.
leaving the organizations. Doesn't matter what salary they were making, didn't matter the benefits. They could not handle a toxic culture anymore, and they weren't going to put up
Right.
with it, and so they left.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is sort of the work that I've been doing, is to raise the awareness
Hmm.
that organizations can pivot. They can start thinking about how they can be a more compassionate culture and a more a responsive culture to the mental health challenges and to the stress that their workforce has right now. It's a lot. And you know what, Tracy? Like, the pandemic is gone, but look at what our world is facing still today. We've got wars, we've got protests, we've got political divisiveness still, and this is not stopping at the doorfront of the businesses anymore. It is coming in, and we've got to figure out how to deal with it.
It is. Which brings me to the point, where you have started this movement of reaching 1 million trauma-informed leaders by the year 2031. That's impressive and lofty at the same time.
No kidding. That's why I think I went fully gray over the last several years.
It looks good on you, by the way.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I had to embrace. It took me a little while to embrace it, but I'm good. Thank you. This was sort of one of those things in 2020. I actually had one of those very similar situations that I was working in a very toxic environment. The pandemic had occurred the response to the pandemic had occurred 7 days after I arrived to this new position. I mean, I hadn't even had time to know who my allies were, had not developed any relationships, never saw my staff. And then the response to, this crisis that we were having globally. And I also had a very toxic environment in terms of leadership. And what I didn't realize is that I had been doing a lot of this work as a leader myself, but that situation created this toxic situation. I was in a fight or flight response every single day. I was having traumatic stress, triggers every day at work because of the toxicity there. And I made the decision after I relocated, right? Like, I was in Oregon for 4 years. I relocated for this job. I took this job and I resigned after 5 months. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. To make a long story short, I bet on myself when I left. And I thought to myself, I've never had a problem getting a job. I've always been recruited for positions. I'll be fine. I just got to leave this place. And what ended up happening is that there was a very public retaliation that occurred from that organization. And it played out on social media. So quite frankly, Tracy, what I got canceled. I got canceled on social media and really truly got blacklisted in my profession. And so I couldn't find a job. No one would hire me.
Wow.
And so that whole situation just absolutely crushed me. And I thought to myself, after I got out of my deep pile of depression and suicide ideation, it just made me sort of, the healing process from all of that put me in a place to do a lot of reflection of my own trauma that I thought I had resolved. It also really allowed me to reevaluate my own leadership style, that perhaps I wasn't as effective of a leader as I thought I was. And it made me realize, when I was reflecting on my bully boss, his behavior, it made me think of my own. And I thought, I don't know if I was a very good leader myself. And so I thought that there would be an opportunity for me to share what I've done in the past, and also let's just be transparent and talk about how, there was lots of areas of improvement for my own leadership style, and how can we create that space for people to do some self-reflection. And that's what I've been doing. It's been a lot of fun. And I've just been so grateful to have the platform, because even in the self of having the platform of helping others, it's been helping me in my own healing journey. I've got about 50,000 people that I have trained or touched in some way. I have a long way to go to 1 million, but I am just tickled to death that I've been able to reach 50,000 to date on my own.
Sure.
And I get feedback almost every single day from people that just say, thank you for being transparent. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for sharing all this information, because they too are going through a lot of stuff in the workplace, and it's been very helpful. So I'm just very honored that people trust me, and I am honored that they trust me with my journey of self-reflection. Yeah.
That's fabulous. And now, does that, when you talked about, all of the different, like you said you were going through trauma at work and other people were too, and then you realized that you may not have, you know, resolved some of your own past traumas and that kind of thing, which most of the counselors that I have talked to, both on the show and personally, they have all shared that they had gone through some of the same issues. And so does that is that part of what you've called the trauma tsunami, where a lot of stuff just hits you, different things hit you at once? And
Yes and no. So, well, yes.
yes and
Let's
no.
start with the yes. The yes. There's these individual accounts, right? Like me as an individual, of really understanding that, having been raised by my grandparents and abandoned by my parents, I never thought of that as being an issue for me because I've always been successful. I never saw that as a potential impact on my ability to have relationships or any. I just never saw it because I was always, it didn't seem to affect my life.
Hmm.
But that's a traumatic experience, right? Like that's
Sure.
an ACE, is what the adverse childhood um, situation. So there's that, acknowledging your own stuff and how it has shaped you as an individual, as a wife, as a mother, and as a professional. So that's the piece. When I think about trauma, though, I really think it's important for us to talk about, and I'll get to the tsunami thing in a minute. Trauma, it's a good and a bad thing.
Sure.
Like, the word trauma has been so mainstream now that people are using it in a way that it's not supposed to be used. They use it for,
Sure.
like, if somebody steals their lunch out of the refrigerator, I
Oh
have so
yeah.
much trauma. This, that is not what this is. So when
No.
we think
No.
about the 3 E's of trauma, so the 3 E's of trauma is the event plus the experience equals the effect. So the event, the traumatic event, is boom. It hits hard. Your team losing in a Super Bowl is not trauma. It hits hard. It's a traumatic event. Plus experience. So that's the second E. The experience is your worldview. The experience is, has there been other past trauma? What is your lens in which you see that traumatic event? So, for example, Tracy, we may experience here in Jacksonville, we may experience a hurricane. But my worldview on that, or my experience, my past experience of natural disasters, may influence the way that I respond to that. And it may be very different than how you respond to it.
Sure.
So
Sure. Yeah.
that second E is experience. And then it equals the effect. So what happens as a result of that? Is it depression? Is it substance abuse? Is it having deep trust issues, anxiety, all of those effects? So in the past, the effects or the behavior, right? Like, that's the stuff that the workplace has said, don't bring that crap in here. That stays
Right.
out there. You deal with that at home or in your therapy office. Don't bring
Right.
it into the workplace. And that changed in 2020. People couldn't help themselves because the trauma and the stress was so much. So here's where we talk about the trauma tsunami. The trauma tsunami, I'm saying, is really around the Gen Z generation. So when we think about the Gen Z generation, there's lots of jokes and stuff that we can have about the Gen Zs. But when we think about the Gen Zs, first of all, they're 12 to 27 years of age. They are 2 billion of the world's population. This is a huge group of population. They're going to be 25% of the workforce by 2025. They also are digital natives. They were truly born with a phone in their hand.
Right.
They've never known a world without the internet. Right? Like this, and so they also are the most diverse. They believe in racial and ethnic diverse populations and community and workplace. They are the most racially and ethnically diverse generation that we've had.
Sure. Yeah.
And they have faced the most traumatic events in their lifetime. And now some people will say, Dawn, that's being a little dramatic. No, the research is very clear. They experienced the Great Recession. They experienced 9/11. They've had war. They had the global pandemic. They had lockdowns. They had mass shootings. They have the social media on their fingertips, terrorism, social injustices, and then the political divisiveness. Let me tell you, this is a group that has been born into chaos.
Sure. Sure.
And this is our future workforce,
I didn't have a lot of the things you just mentioned were the furthest thing from my mind when I was growing up. I mean,
and you didn't have a phone in your hand that.
My children were young teenagers before I got my first flip top phone. I'm not kidding you.
So this is what I'm saying, right? Like, so we have all of these chaotic events, and it's all playing out on their phone 24/7. It's right there. It's right there. So what I'm really nervous about is that is what I call this trauma tsunami. The 2 billion population of Gen Z is already in your workplace. So they're already hired by you, by our companies, or they're on their way. And so that is that's a trauma tsunami coming to our workplaces. And so the question is, first of all, is your organization ready for that? Do you have a culture in place and the services in place to deal with a lot of the mental health challenges that this generation is bringing into the workplace? And and they have no problems talking about it. There's no stigma. They talk openly about mental health challenges, and they are going to bring it into the workplace. So that toothpaste is out of the tube. So what is your organization going to do to really meet this Gen Z where they are? That's the first thing. The second thing, what is your leadership? How is your leadership prepared for that? So if we're not showing up as leaders, if we're not showing up the best way that we know how, because we haven't taken care of our shit, then we're not going to be the best leaders for this generation that's coming into our workplace. So that's what I call the trauma tsunami, because it's coming, Tracy.
I can see it. You're making perfect sense there. So how would you approach businesses, workplaces to become more trauma-informed environments so that they're ready for this tsunami?
That's such a great question. That's really all that I've been doing over the last 3.5 years, is either doing training. I have 2 LinkedIn learning courses that, again, LinkedIn is a perfect place to get in front of the corporate environment or the workplace. I also have a certificate course at the University of North Florida where we're engaging people, quite frankly, from all over the world. I've got folks from England and folks from Australia, Canada, and United States that are taking those certificate courses. And, I've got my TED Talk as well. So these are really great opportunities for folks, leaders, emerging leaders, to engage in and just start to become aware of it. But really what we focus on are these core principles of trauma-informed leadership. And the trauma-informed leadership, there are 6 principles in the way that we lead. Number 1, do we create safety in the workplace? Trust, peer support. Do people feel that they have the trust and the safety to turn to their peers for support and connect to resources? Collaboration. Does your organization collaborate across the enterprise, or is it just in the C-suite kingdom of collaboration?
Right.
Do employees, all employees, whether it's horizontal or vertical, do they have a voice? And do they get to have some say in implementation? Or is it a top down, do it my way, or don't do it at all, or get out kind of an environment? So voice and choice in the organization. Culture, gender, and history. So, you could look at that as an organization's diversity, equity, and inclusion approach, or just meet people's culture where they are, how an Asian American, culturally speaking, reacts to certain workplace and cultures might be very different
Sure.
from mine. So how
Sure.
can we be sensitive around who is showing up in the workplace and respect their culture? So those are really, really important things to look at from a leadership perspective, are those 6 principles. The other thing that I work with organizations on is the style of leadership, so we do some work around, are you an authoritative leader? Are you a visionary leader? Are you an affiliative leader? That, people like, that means like, people come first, right? Like you put your needs behind your workers.
Hmm.
Democratic, are you a democratic leader? How about a pace setter? Is it do as I do and do it now kind of a leader? Or are you a coaching type of leader? So Dan Goleman talks about how those 6 leadership styles are what he calls the styles of emotional leadership. And
Hmm.
so I work with leaders and I go, hey, where do you see yourself in those 6 principles? And Tracy, it's so funny because they'll go, oh, I'm everything. I am this,
Right.
I am that. I do all this. And so I let them sort of like really love on themselves a little bit. But then I say, okay, so if we were to ask your staff how you lead, what do you think they would say? Do you think that they would say the same thing? And 9 times out of 10, they won't. And that's really where the reckoning, I will tell you that it was really going deep into this where it made me start to go, because again, I was like really reflecting on the toxicity of the last organization that I was in, and the bully boss. And I started looking at these styles of emotional leadership and started actually seeing my own self in there. And so I had kind of my own come to Jesus. And I said, you know what? I always thought of myself as being this charismatic, transformational leader, which
Sure.
I am. But I was also a pace setter. And I drove my staff. And
Yeah.
let me just be honest. Since I've done that reflection, I have gone back to some of my past staff and I've apologized to them because
How about that?
I did not know. I really did not
Hmm.
know until I really started to become very self-aware in this work. And it's been really important. So Tracy, that's when we talk about, that's what we do with leaders, so individuals. But the other thing that we do is we start talking about the culture of your organization. So that's really where we
Right.
start talking about systems. And systems are, I give this metaphor of like the dirty fishbowl. So you have a fishbowl with a goldfish in it, and that goldfish is the leader, right? So we're going to do all this work with the leader and we're going to get them to be trauma informed and get them to be self-aware. But if your fishbowl is dirty, like really bad dirty, and it hasn't been changed in a while, that fishbowl, that dirty fishbowl, is really a metaphor for the toxic workplace. So you can do all the
Sure.
individual leadership work that you can, but if you're sitting in a toxic, dirty fishbowl, it doesn't matter. So you do need to look at the way that you hire. Who are you hiring? Are you hiring authoritative leaders? That's a dirty
Hmm.
fishbowl. Um, what are your policies? How's your governance? How do you implement change management? Is it top down or is it collaborative? So we really work with organizations to take a really hard look at your systems and your culture.
So we were talking about
That's
some of
really
those
funny.
tools. Yeah, we were talking about some of those tools. How they hire,
Yeah,
the type of
yeah.
people that they hire, and that kind of thing.
your change management process, right? Like, so how are you, are you going to create change in your organization from a top down approach? Um, that is a very trauma responsive approach. Or do you do a top down and a bottom up, and you really try to meet your employees where they are and help them get through that change cycle?
Mm-hmm.
That is what I would call a trauma informed approach to change management. And guys, it's not that hard. Everybody was like, oh, that's going to take too much. No, it doesn't. And if you put your employees in the center of all your decisions, um, boy, your retention rate goes up,
Sure.
right? Your employee satisfaction goes up. I can't imagine organizations not wanting to make that a priority.
Right. And you had, like you were talking about, you had gone in examples of your own, looking at your own, leadership style, and you had to go back and, look at yourself. And
Oh, and it was hard. Yeah, of course, it's always hard to reflect on your own self, right? Like, and that's why people don't do it, because it's hard.
oh, I
And I
know.
had a lot of reckoning. I had a lot of reckoning that I had to do. And yeah, I mean, I wasn't a terrible boss, but I certainly wasn't as good as I thought I was. And that's the reality that we all need. We all need to be more self-aware, for sure.
So, what would you say is some obstacles that like say for instance, you just said it's hard to reflect, and so
Mm-hmm.
when you're working with these other leaders to implement some of these tools and some of these frameworks into their practice as a leader, what are some of the things that you can help them with when they're they may have obstacles to overcome. They might be having a hard time
Yeah.
with that reckoning process.
It's a great question. I think that there's a couple of things. So I can work with businesses from soup to nuts. I can come in and just do a training just to kind of get them to raise the awareness, or I could do a full blown assessment of the organization. I have a proprietary valid instrument that I created because of this work,
Mm-hmm.
where I help organizations launch that survey to really talk about what are the trust levels, what are the trauma informed principles in place. So I can help them really kind of unpack kind of what's going on in the organization and help them create a work plan and give them some of those tools that they can do some very solid engagement in the organization. But organizations can just, first of all, the leader, if they can talk about how they want to do the personal work, I tell people all the time that if you want to take my trainings or if you want to engage me with some consulting, I'm not going to do this unless you really are serious about doing self-reflection first.
Mm-hmm.
This work is not about others. It's about you first. And if you're not willing to look yourself in the mirror, then I'm probably not the consultant for you.
Almost
you
like
cannot be a hypocrite.
Right. It's almost like one of the 12 steps. You got to do that inventory.
That's never thought about it, but it's true. You have to look yourself in the mirror.
Well,
What am I doing to contribute to the culture? And Tracy, that's what I had to do with my own self, and go, yeah, I probably didn't handle that very well 10 years ago. Yikes. So, yeah, because I often will say, somebody will call me or they'll want to talk with me about what's going on in their workplace. And they'll say, well, this is happening and this is happening and this happened and this happened. And I'll say, okay, but how do you factor into this?
Right.
If you're talking about what everybody else is doing, so where's your participation in this? And that I will tell you, and if you're not ready for that, I'm probably not the consultant for you.
Not going to work. Not going to work. How do you see
work.
trauma-informed leadership contributing to the greater inclusivity and psychological safety in the workplace overall?
Oh, it's for sure.
Number one.
For sure. Psychological safety is a really big thing that's happening. And well, it's been around
Sure.
for a long time, but I think again, 2020 just really kind of elevated these practices and these concepts that have been around for a while has really elevated them up. And safety is that's the first principle of a trauma-informed organization. And so to be psychologically safe is not, that doesn't mean that you are a trauma-informed organization. You've got to do the work. You got to look at the systems, and you've got to look at your leadership style. So it's a component. That's why I always tell people that if you have a DEI program, keep going. That's only 1/6 of the way there, but you're ready to go. You've got something in place, and we can start building off of that. Look at your mental health benefits. Now, be careful, though, that just because you offer mental health benefits doesn't mean that you get to check the box and say, I'm good. No, that just means that you're offering access to mental health resources. But remember what I said about the dirty fishbowl.
Yeah.
You can offer all these mental health benefits all you want, but if I have to come back into a dirty fishbowl, it's really not working.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like you say, they can offer the programs and offer, time off to go to see counselors or, what have you, anything along those lines. But it's another thing to actually get them to give the employees the day off to go do it.
Well, there's that too. Yes, absolutely.
They might say it on paper.
Don't punish them. Yeah, and then don't punish them for taking the time off.
Exactly.
Right? Like that's that push and pull that we're talking about. You've got to create those systems in place to support the individual, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So what steps do you believe that are necessary to achieve your 1 million informed leaders by the year 2031? What do you think are some of the steps that you need to achieve to get that number, hit that number?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you asked that, because I think that what I've done in the last 2.5, 3 years has been really good to raise the awareness and to get the word out. And that has happened. I've just been so pleased with that. And sometimes, Tracy, can I tell you a story?
Sure.
So I was where was I? Oh, I was in Washington, D.C. And I went to a meeting. And it was actually a meeting for my regular 9-to-5 job. And there was a person in there who said, I know you. And I was like, what? And she said, I thought that I recognized the name, but I wasn't sure. And I didn't think that I had met you. And I said, well, did we work together in some place? She said, no, I took your LinkedIn course.
Oh, there you go.
And so I know. And so there we started having this conversation. And I just think to myself, this has been so wonderful, because you do all this work and you don't really, I've reached almost 50,000 people, but you don't really know what the impact has been. And so, and you don't know who's listening. And so that was just this amazing thing where this person was telling me, you really enlightened me and changed the way that I think about things. I'm like, oh my God, it's just that's what I'm saying. So yeah, I'm way far off of 1 million people, but somewhere I am impacting and I'm making a difference. And so that is so wonderful. So the next step that I'm trying to do over the next 6 years, 6-7 years, is now I'm starting to build a coalition. So we are creating a community of practice, a national community of practice. Most of my work really takes me nationally. And so we're building this coalition around the country of people that have either taken my training or have decided that they want to start doing consulting themselves. And we're all coming together under this umbrella of trying to reach 1 million people. And we're going to be meeting sometime in June virtually to really start thinking about, what does that look like? How do we do trainers? How do we identify key components of this work, where if I have somebody in California that's doing trauma-informed training and she's reaching 5,000 people a year, can I count those numbers? Can I add you to that $1 million pool, right? Like, I don't want any money. I don't want any credit. But if you're meeting some type of best practice trauma-informed approach, hey, let's count your numbers so that we can collectively as a country get to that million mark.
That's smart.
So I'm really super excited about that. And that's really going to start coming and kicking off in June.
That's a smart move right there. Like you said, have a coalition and have a handful of meetings a year, to see how
That's
their
right.
progress.
That's right.
You can follow their own individual progress as they're doing it at key points around the
That's a
country.
great idea.
Around the country, around the
Yeah.
nation. And I will tell you, there have been more than a few guests on this podcast that are very familiar with your work.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks, Tracy.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just like put my head down and I just do the work, right? Like
Right.
I just wanna help as many people as I can, and you just never know who you're reaching.
Well, it has been a joy talking to you. You're welcome to come on this program anytime. But before we go, I've got one last question for you. I'd like to get a little lighthearted here. Since we were all on this, we were all on the tough stuff. Let's lighten it up just a tad. What do you think?
Okay. All right, cool.
Okay. How many more taco stands do we need in Jacksonville?
You know what? You can have it as many tacos as you want. I'll just be honest with you. I think that a whole thing has been really silly. And if somebody wants to open up a taco stand, by God, let capitalism do its thing and open up a taco stand.
Well, they got that new nice place going in there at 5 Points, so that's not going to be your everyday Taco Bell taco. So,
that's very true, and we've got plenty of those too.
That's a fact. That's a fact. You've been a joy to have on the program, Dawn, and like I said, you're welcome on here anytime. We'll be spreading all your links around in the descriptions. This program will air in about 2 weeks, I believe, is when I told you. But all the other information is going to be on the website and on the streaming platforms directly after that.
Excellent.
So
well, thank you, Tracy. I know it's been a long time coming, but I appreciate you your perseverance and getting me on.
Well, yeah, I think it's the longest time it's taken me to get somebody on here with you.
Here I am.
But here you are. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Tracy. Okay, bye-bye.
Well, that's a wrap. Another fantastic episode of the podcast. You can find us on all the social media platforms, wherever you surf, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter X, Threads, wherever. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. And on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like, share, comment, and smash that subscribe button. If you're streaming audio for the podcast, you can find us wherever you get your favorite podcast programs. In the meantime, I like to tell everybody, take care of yourselves and each other. Until next time. Peace.